Today I'd like to talk about kombucha, but not brewing, bottling, not second ferment, not flavoring. I want to talk about ignoring your kombucha. I want to talk about taking a break from brewing kombucha. I want to tell you about how to completely neglect your kombucha for over 6 months without killing it. I'm gonna guess that everyone who's ever made kombucha has also wished they could take a break from brewing kombucha. And if you don't have a full understanding of how it works, you might think that would be really hard. You can brew this wonderful drink, save yourself a lot of money, and not have it control your life. This isn't a milk cow, it's a bottle of culture. So let's talk about how we can take a 6-month break from brewing kombucha. As many of you might know, kombucha is a ferment that continues on. You can make batch after batch with the same SCOBY culture. And if you don't know what a SCOBY is, it's a symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast, and it has all the bacteria that it needs to make a batch of fermented tea. This is June kombucha. This is made with green tea and honey, but traditional kombucha that most people are familiar with is made with black tea and sugar. I call this type of a ferment a perpetual ferment because it perpetuates. You can continue it on forever. Other examples that I think of that is kefir, either dairy kefir or water kefir, as you can reuse those grains in new batches over and over again. And I think that another good example, it could even be your ginger bug, which you don't have to keep it forever. It's pretty simple to make it new. But if you keep feeding a ginger bug, it will keep providing for you. And if you keep feeding your sourdough starter, it will keep providing yeast for you. So any of those kind of ferments I call perpetual ferments. Keeping a perpetual ferment can really feel like keeping a pet or a houseplant, right? Because you have this thing in a jar, it's in your house, it's alive, it needs food and water in the right ratios at the right timing, and it provides things for you. With a dog, it provides companionship. With a cat, it provides whatever cat provides. The kombucha SCOBY provides sweet tea transmuted into a tangy, effervescent, slightly bubbly, probiotic-rich elixir of the gods. So a lot of people give kombucha a lot of credit for health benefits in that. I try not to think too much about that because that's all the stuff I can't see. What I can see is that I get a bubbly drink at the end that doesn't taste too sweet and it's really good. And kombucha makes me feel good when I drink it. So keeping these perpetual ferments like a houseplant or a pet can start to seem overwhelming, especially if you've got a lot of irons in the fire, you've got a lot going on, you work full time, you got kids, but you wanted to start this hobby and you're tired of paying $4 a bottle for your GT's kombucha. You thought you would make it and it sounds good. You only have to buy the SCOBY once, or you can grow a SCOBY, and suddenly you're making more kombucha than you can drink. The SCOBY continues to proliferate and grow new SCOBYs, so then before you know it, you have multiple jars, and it's hard to keep up with bottling and drinking and rotating, and it feels like it's too much. And I think that's what happens to a lot of people, sometimes really quickly on, and they decide to quit. Now, the length of time it takes to brew a batch of kombucha can vary as well. 70 to 30 days is what's usually recommended. But here's the catch. You don't have to drink the kombucha and continue to perpetuate it. You can take a break. Fermenting should be fun and not stressful. And I think when we go to learn from resources online, there's usually people telling that there's a definite way to do things. They're describing the perfect conditions to keep something. They're not describing the full range of acceptable conditions to keep something. So while you could say that you need a cellar of under 40 degrees to be able to keep your sauerkraut, if you leave out that you could just move it to the refrigerator, then you're really missing something that could inspire a whole bunch more people to try to take this on. For kombucha, when you look up trying to take a break from it, most people say to brew a new batch, leave your SCOBY in there, and then come back to it in about 6 weeks and feed it again. And that's great. That's a good way to do it. It's a good way to keep your SCOBY super healthy, but I'm gonna tell you a secret. I don't do that. I leave my SCOBY for about 6 months at a time without feeding it or doing anything except double checking to make sure there is still water, there's still moisture covering the top layer. And it's pretty simple to get it started again when I want to in the spring. So how do you take a break from making kombucha? If you're just trying to take a short break from brewing kombucha and you're gonna go on vacation for a week or two, don't even worry about it. Start a new batch, like you normally would, and then leave it. The other option, if it's more than 2 weeks, a month or so, you can just start a new batch of kombucha and then leave it there until you're ready to brew a new batch again. And that can be a few months, and what you're left with is probably something that you're not going to actually want to drink. It might be vinegary. If it's really vinegary, then yes, you can use this kombucha vinegar to use in any recipe that you would normally use vinegar in. So if you want to also try your hand at vinegar making, this is kind of a good way to get your foot in the door. Make it by accident. Now, if you know you're going to be leaving it for a long time, like several months, you can make a regular batch, but increase the amount of sugar or honey that you're putting into it by 2. That's just going to give more fuel for your SCOBY to go off of longer. But remember, eventually your SCOBY is also going to need the nutrients that comes from the tea. It doesn't just survive off of the calories from the sugar, just the carbohydrates, the sugar alone. It survives off of the enzymes, nutrients, whatever from the tea. If you're going for a really long-term storage like I do, 6 months, you probably want to try to keep it in a pretty cool place. Cool and dark for sure. But these SCOBYs, believe it or not, want to live. They want to survive. So they're going to adapt to whatever conditions you provide to the best of their ability. That means that having the perfect temperature or the perfect situation is not necessary to keep cultures alive, active, and happy. Now, if you really are precise and like your kombucha just so, with a great flavor profile and fizzy every time, then this might not be the method for you, the total neglect method that I use. Maybe your method would be more like once every month, you drain about half the liquid from the jar and refill it with extra sweet tea. And that saves you from having to get a new jar and wash this one, and all you do is brew your tea like you normally would, double the amount of sugar or honey that you normally would, and make sure it's cool to the same as room temperature, and then take some of this liquid out and add some in. This is going to be a way to feed your SCOBYs and maintain their health, more vibrancy than I am doing for sure, and it'll be a less time to get it started and going again when you do start brewing again. And you might be wondering, what's the difference between my method and what a SCOBY hotel is? I think when people refer to a SCOBY hotel, they're usually referring to a place to keep your extra SCOBYs. Because if you're new to kombucha, you might not realize you have a SCOBY, you start a batch of kombucha, and every time you brew a batch, that SCOBY doubles in thickness, and it's like layers, which you can separate and then start 2 batches. And then you could start 4 batches, and then you can start 8 batches, and then 16. And suddenly you have a whole bunch of kombucha brewing at the same time, and it can get overwhelming. You don't want to waste your SCOBYs, you don't want to throw them away. Only so many of your friends want to trade or buy or get them from you to brew their own. So you end up trying to feed it to the dog, put it in the compost. What can you do if you want to keep extra SCOBYs that you're not using right now? And that's what people call a SCOBY hotel. You're going to feed a SCOBY hotel the same way I just mentioned here, where you're going to just drain half the liquid occasionally and pour some more sweet tea. So most people say that you should be feeding at least every 6 months some sweet tea to either of these jars, right? At this point, this one might be considered a SCOBY hotel because of what's happened to it since I left it alone. So mine's been sitting since August 26th, and today is January 14th as I record this, I think. So we were at about 5 months of complete neglect. And the couple of things that I'm noticing from this jar and what I feel are really important, I must keep liquid in the jar. When I look at this jar occasionally, I'm seeing that there's still liquid covering the top SCOBY. And if you look in this other jar, my hotel, I have neglected that. That was behind this jar, so I couldn't see it as well. The top is like almost dry. Now, not quite dry, but it doesn't have a layer of liquid over the top of it. The liquid is really important because that acidic liquid is what's going to prevent the SCOBY from being able to grow mold on the top. Mold needs oxygen to grow, and if you don't have the SCOBY floating above the surface, then the mold can't grow on it. So watch it, because sometimes the SCOBYs like to try to kind of grow out of the jar, grow out of their liquid. So just make sure that there's liquid. If I saw liquid loss to the point that this was getting dry, I would make some sweet tea and drain a little bit of the liquid, add that sweet tea in and mix it. So it would be a feeding and also making sure there was enough liquid. Now, a lot of people know with perpetual ferments like sourdough starters, you just stick it in the fridge for a while and take a break. Same with kefir grains or water kefir grains. But SCOBY is different. It wants to be left room temperature and it wants to be in liquid. So those are the 2 important things that I always remember. Now, if you're taking a really long break, if you think you're not going to make kombucha for like a year, I would just save some of the really strong kombucha that you have in a bottle in the fridge, and then when time comes, you can start a new SCOBY with that. Just by adding that starter liquid to some sweet tea, you'll grow a SCOBY. Then you can discard that liquid, reserving a cup of it with your new SCOBY to start your first batch of kombucha. That process is the same if you're buying store-bought kombucha. You can use GT's Kombucha to grow yourself a SCOBY from scratch. The other place you can get a SCOBY is from a friend, of course, or from Cultures for Health. That's who I recommend, and that is who I bought my June SCOBY from originally, so I'll make sure to link to that in the description of the video so you can see where I got those. Taking care of your SCOBY in a way that works with your lifestyle and your schedule, and it also works with your environment, makes sense. But if you want to work this into your daily schedule so you can make kombucha just a normal part of your life that fits into your and your family's rhythms, then this is just one variation of that. This is what works for me. So my hope here that to get across is that you can just neglect your SCOBY for 6 months and then come back to it. And keep in mind, the first batch you make after a long break like this might not be the best batch you've ever had, but it'll be drinkable. It's not going to make you sick. Making sure to keep that consistent for a while when you get it going again, then you'll start to get that good fizzy kombucha back soon enough. Now I'd like to show you the anatomy of the jar that's been sitting for 5 months. You're going to have some liquid loss, and this is actually not that bad up here on this one. As you can see of this video I have from last year, there was quite a bit of liquid loss in 6 months. And then the SCOBYs, you can see how thick this is. This is the SCOBYs that are continuing to grow and multiply during the time that it's waiting and sitting. So I started with something that was less than 1 inch thick, and now here I am to probably 3 inches thick of SCOBY. When I take this to brew a new batch, I'm gonna just pull off one layer of whatever looks like the healthiest, nicest SCOBY and use that to start my new batch. And then below that is this liquid here, which would normally be kombucha, but because of the time that it sat and the time that the SCOBY had to metabolize the sugar, this is very acidic. So this is going to be kombucha vinegar, and I'm absolutely gonna strain this and bottle it and save it to use as vinegar when I'm done with this process. I am gonna need 1 cup of this liquid for every gallon of kombucha that I'm going to start to brew. So I'm gonna take 1 SCOBY and 1 cup of liquid and start that in my new sweet tea to ferment. My SCOBY Hotel has had quite a bit more evaporation, as you can see. There's not much liquid at the bottom. It's mostly full of SCOBYs. The only problem in this one is that the top layer does not have liquid on it. When I smell these two things, when I open them up and look inside, you can see this one has quite a bit more liquid on top and it smells good. It smells like kombucha that's just over fermented, just really vinegary. And then in this other one, it has kind of an off smell that I can't really put my finger on. It's not rotten, it's not rancid, but it's not pleasant. But it's just the beginning of not being pleasant. So if I peel this top layer off and add more sweet tea, I will save this jar. Then the question is, do I want to save this jar? Should I throw these SCOBYs away? I have enough here to get started and to share with other people. So that is always up to you, how you handle your ever multiplying SCOBY. And I think it's also important, if you want to take breaks, to just get to the point where you don't feel bad if you're just like throwing some of these away. It's totally okay. But bury it in the ground, bury it into your compost, feed it to your chickens, whatever. I've heard of people dehydrating and making dog treats with it. It seems like it would be like leather. What I hope I've conveyed in this video is how you can really take on a perpetual ferment, taking care of a fermentation culture in your own home, but have it work for you instead of you working for it. So how can you fit it into your schedule, your lifestyle, and how do you make it adapt to your environment? And that's very much just experimenting, trying. Don't be scared. Don't follow all the rules correctly as like they just say, you know, maybe start out like that until you understand it, but watch and observe and see, and before you know it, you'll be able to do this more intuitively and have a better understanding of how it works for you in your kitchen. Thanks for watching. I'm Lanny, and this was Preserving Today.